On the morning of November 14th, 1889, a 25-year-old reporter named Nellie Bly stood on the deck of the steamship Augusta Victoria. She watched New York disappear into gray winter fog. She carried one small travel bag, one dress sturdy enough to survive 3 months of continuous wear, a few changes of underwear, a jar of cold cream. Wrapped around her neck, hidden under her coat, a bag holding nearly all the money she had in the world. She had 2 days' notice to prepare for a trip that would take her around the entire planet. She intended to do it faster than anyone in human history, faster than any real person ever had, faster even than a man who did not exist. A year earlier, Bly had walked into her editor's office at Joseph Pulitzer's New York World with an idea. It sounded, to most people, like fiction pretending to be a plan. Jules Verne had written a novel in 1873 about a fictional Englishman named Phileas Fogg who circled the globe in 80 days on a wager. The book was wildly popular. It was also, everyone agreed, impossible. Steamship schedules, train connections, ocean crossings, none of it lined up cleanly enough in the real world to make 80 days a novelist's convenient fantasy. Bly wanted to try anyway. She wanted to turn Verne's fiction into fact, and she wanted to beat his time while she did it. What almost nobody in the crowd, cheering her off the dock that November morning knew, was that Bly was not the only woman about to attempt it. Across town, a very different kind of journalist was about to be handed the assignment of her life, whether she wanted it or not. Elizabeth Bisland was 28 years old, a literary essayist known for her striking presence and her sharp, elegant prose. She wrote book reviews. She hosted a small apartment gathering where writers and artists debated the artistic questions of the day. She was, by every account, gracious, cultured, and utterly uninterested in stunt journalism. Then a newspaper man named John Brisbane Walker read about Bly's planned trip in the morning paper and saw an opportunity. He owned a struggling 3-year-old magazine called Cosmopolitan. If he could beat the mighty New York World, he could put his magazine on the map. The race was on. 2 women, 2 routes, and 1 world to conquer. In the autumn of 1889, inside a dimly lit wood-paneled office, editor John Walker issued a challenge to Elizabeth Bisland that would change history forever. Given only a few hours to prepare, the refined socialite watched in shock as her trunks were hurriedly packed with silk dresses and elaborate Victorian hats. On the night of November 14th, a massive steam train huffed thick white smoke at a New York station, illuminated by a cold silver moon. As Bisland headed west across the vast American continent, the legendary Nellie Bly was already boarding a steamship, heading east across the treacherous Atlantic. 2 women, moving in opposite directions, began a desperate, high-stakes sprint around the globe, their paths tracing glowing lines across the map of the world. In the humid, bustling docks of Hong Kong, Nellie Bly's confidence wavered. A local official delivered news of arrival that chilled her to the bone. She realized she wasn't alone. A phantom competitor, Elizabeth Bisland, was closing the gap, a ghost-like figure haunting her every mile and every port. Across the globe, massive steamships battled titan waves, while iron locomotives tore through frozen, snow-capped mountain passes in a brutal test of 19th century endurance. Back in New York, Pulitzer's world was electric. Printing presses churned out daily updates, turning Nellie Bly into a household name across the entire nation. But at the Cosmopolitan, the atmosphere was quiet and refined. Their slow production cycle struggled to keep pace with the breakneck speed of the race. John Walker attempted to stake his reputation on Bisland, but the smug, powerful editors of the news giants dismissed his underdog with a cold, arrogant sneer. While Bly was greeted by cheering crowds, Bisland raced through remote, silent landscapes, a solitary figure navigating the vast and beautiful reaches of the earth. In their separate cabins, both women stared into the distance, neither knowing exactly where the other stood in this invisible global duel. As the final days arrived, the two glowing paths across the map began to converge, reaching a cinematic climax that would define an era of exploration. Two pioneering women, one incredible planet. It was a race against time, against the elements, and ultimately against each other. Then came the moment that decided everything, and it had nothing to do with either woman's stamina, courage, or skill. While crossing England, Bisland was told she had missed her connection. A swift German steamer called the AMZ scheduled to depart from Southampton. She believed it. What she did not know was that her own publisher had secretly bribed the shipping company to delay that very ship's departure. The bribe worked. The ship waited. Nobody told Bisland. She turned away from the dock, convinced she had already lost her window. She boarded a slower, older vessel instead, the Bothnia, in place of the fast ship that had been sitting there the entire time, waiting. It was the single strangest twist in the entire race. A woman lost days of her life because of a secret act of goodwill. She was betrayed by information withheld in her own favor. Somewhere in the fog of Southampton, a ship sat waiting for a woman. Bligh, meanwhile, was having her own crisis. Rough weather during her Pacific crossing put her 2 full days behind schedule, arriving in San Francisco on January 21st instead of on time. It looked like the race would come down to hours. But Pulitzer was not about to let his newspaper's biggest story slip away. He chartered a private train, the Miss Nellie Bligh Special. It existed to get his reporter across the United States faster than any passenger train in American history had ever managed. It covered over 2,500 miles in 69 hours, setting speed records. Crowds gathered at stations just to watch it scream past. On January 25, 1890, at 3:51 in the afternoon, Nellie Bligh stepped off a train in New Jersey, 72 days after leaving. She had beaten Phileas Fogg's fictional record by more than a week. She had done it for real, in front of a watching world. Elizabeth Bisland was still crossing the Atlantic when Bligh crossed the finish line. She arrived in New York 4.5 days later, having genuinely lost through no fault of her own skill, but through a secret kindness that never reached her in time. What happened next is the part almost nobody remembers. Bligh became instantly and permanently one of the most famous women in the world. There were Nellie Bligh board games, Nellie Bligh trading cards, a hit stage musical based on her journey. Her own book, Around the World in 72 Days, became an immediate bestseller, cementing her status as a global icon. She had wanted fame, had chased it deliberately, and now she had it in a form that would outlive her by more than a century. Bisland wanted almost none of it and got even less. Her account of the journey, in 7 stages, sold modestly and faded quickly. When she died in 1929, her obituary in the New York Times did not even mention the race that once made her a household name. She spent her career writing literary criticism and biography, building a body of work she valued far more than the stunt. There is one more piece of this story. Nellie Bligh did something Phileas Fogg never could. She met Jules Verne himself at his home. The 61-year-old novelist and his wife wanted to see the young woman attempting to outrace his most famous creation. Verne reportedly believed she could actually do it, that a real person might genuinely beat the number he had invented as a literary device. Weeks later, she proved him right, beating his fictional record by more than a week while he was still alive to watch it happen. He had written impossible fiction and lived just long enough to watch a real woman turn it into fact. While a second woman, every bit as capable, quietly lost the same race to a shipping company clerk's unread telegram. 2 women left New York in 1889, chasing the same impossible number, traveling in opposite directions around the same planet. One became a legend. The other became a footnote, defeated not by distance, but by a secret act of kindness arrived too late.